I'll tell you a little bit from a macro perspective because this subject needs explanation. We can't talk about transportation efficiencies and decarbonizing it without understanding the bigger picture of the energy paradigm. So, for instance, here you see the pictures. I worked a little bit with fuel cell electric cars. Yeah. So I work a lot with EV and e-mobility. And for instance, already in 2007, we had the first fuel cell electric car on Gotland Ring. It was the Honda FCX Clarity. And the reason a fuel cell car like this didn't go to production until 11 years later, we'll come back to that in my explanation in the evolution of electromobility. We'll come back to that, but we did that already in 2007 at Gotland Ring, so we had testing and also a global launch for this model. And unfortunately, during those 11 years, it was only a compliance car and used by Hollywood stars in California, where they could actually fuel the car in one place in all of Los Angeles, more or less. Then we work with, also we are now including some in our smart energy road and traffic system energy harvesting idea. We're going to have 20 megawatts of solar cells installed within the southern loop of the race circuit, which is Gotland Ring, which is situated in a former limestone quarry. So we take wasteland and put solar cells there and a race and test track, which works mostly with EVs and e-mobility. But of course, it's open for historic ICE internal combustion engine activities as well, and we'll come to that also, how they can have a part in this in the future, in the transformation of the transport paradigm in a more sustainable way. In the future, you'll see on land, sea, air, we'll have electrified transportation, and I would say that probably Visby, Stockholm Visby will be the first in Sweden at least with electric flights within just a couple of years. And also for our track, we actually plan to have smaller aircraft, which will be landing directly on the racetrack for some B2B events. World Ecological Forum I started in 2010, actually in 2008, but we had our first major event in 2010. And already then we talked about these big issues, which are still big and the same still today, about tipping points and thresholds and so on. So anthropogenic climate change is for this audience, of course, it's a given. We don't have to discuss it, and planetary boundaries and tipping points and where we are today. We are in critical times. We had a very good keynote speaker among those 300 guests. We had 40 expert speakers, Professor Johan Rockström from Stockholm Resilience Center. And still the same issues are on the board. Just in yesterday, if you look at the news yesterday, you may have seen we have an amazing pandemic paradox in the form that COVID-19 actually diminishes our green investment capabilities because of economic contraction. But also you can see that the actual greenhouse gases, the CO2 and other gases, don't diminish. Actually, they just increase. It's like filling a bathtub. The bathtub is full and we turn off the faucet, but it's still dripping a little bit even during a pandemic times, but it's not really emptying. It's a very complex issue how to diminish, and the turnaround is going to be decades. And during this industrial era, we've created so much CO2 emissions, it's really difficult to handle. So how are we going to solve this? Transportation efficiency is an imperative part of the solution. As an instrument, we'll use e-mobility in the beginning. The problem is that investments by governments and companies, on paper, there are a lot of commitments and not only the Paris Agreement, but there are a lot of commitments all around. And if you look at the concrete investment levels, they don't really match the desired commitment. It's a little bit like, let's say we have one of our next speakers also tennis players like I am. So let's say I would tell some of your audience that we're going to play next year in Wimbledon and we're going to win it, and we're going to practice table tennis 30 minutes every second week, and then we're going to play first round Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal, and by the way, not only have you only played on a table tennis court, but also we'll give you ping pong paddles, and then you have to play these guys. So it's about that level. If you look at, you need a minimum of 10 times the current rate of investment for renewables today it's about $350 billion level, and we need to be at 3,500 billion per year renewable energy investments, and then that's 10 years and beyond to be able to even somehow have any resilience for the planet to survive. At the same time, we need a minimum of 50% drop in fossil fuel related investments as well. Historically, electric propulsion actually was first. If you look over 100 years back, the electric vehicle was the more sophisticated option. It was women preferred it a lot. It was clean, it was hip and cool, and then the combustion engine ones were dirty, and you had to crank them like this, and actually they didn't become viable before the starter engine was invented, and of course eventually you find a fuel form that made it go longer distances. The electric version of the automobile was really a winner for as long as we stayed in the urban areas and didn't travel to the countryside, and once the infrastructure improved and people wanted to travel longer distances, the then electric vehicle wasn't quite up to it. So also because of all the derivatives from the crude oil business, when they were actually looking for they used some fat oil from whales, which is crazy, to burn in lamps and lights, and while searching for a replacement for this, they found that they could get from crude oil this kind of what we call gasoline, or benzene in Swedish, but gasoline or gas in the States. And there are a lot of derivatives and abstractions you get from this the crude oil, and the problem is that a lot of these come out anyway. So if we need it for flying planes or what have you, at that altitude you need a certain level of fuel that only can be extracted from crude oil for now. And the problem is that there's so much petrochemical industry and other derivatives that they need to be used anyway. So they have a hold on the system, and we have to now somehow through e-mobility find a way around it so we don't use fossil fuels in the same amount, especially in transportation. So also we need to talk about in the future, because renewable energy production has become so inexpensive. So there will be, and there are already, stranded assets. Examples of coal mines and some shale and fracking companies are probably going bankrupt as we speak in the US. This is a good thing in a way, but then you look at how do we handle other nations and growing regions. They are behind in the curve of development, and do we say that no, you cannot be part of creating a lifestyle that we've had in the West? Instead of committing the same mistakes, we should maybe help them in a small Nordic country like Sweden or the whole Nordic region. We should create a platform where we could create new technologies and best practices, and then somehow be able to help scale it up and globalize these new technologies. And of course now the innovation is all around the world, so we are by no means the only ones who can do it. But we have certain values here that we care, and we try in our small societies in the Nordic countries, we try to live up to it, what we talk, but at the same time our per capita emissions are much higher than these developing nations that we tend to bash, that oh, they're dirty old technology and they have these emissions, but per capita emissions are actually much less than us. If you look in typical country in the West, we are between 2 to 4 times consuming our planet today, and in the US about 4 planets, and maybe Sweden 2-3 planets. So it's not really, we are not as good as we think. So the big issue, we need 10 times more of the renewable energy investment than we actually are committed to in international different agreements as well. So enabling technologies to reach these goals, how can we do it? We can look at, for instance, the easiest way to start from battery electric vehicles, because we have now a really low cost already. In China you could get maybe 50 euro kilowatt hour battery cells. Some time ago the critical level was $100, which I think that Volkswagen, for instance, has reached already. But the prices are going down on lithium ion batteries, but there are better chemistries coming out, so we don't need to worry about the battery chemistry and so much of range anxiety and these issues, because there are many solutions for that. And the batteries, like I said, they're getting at an amazing pace, getting better all the time. So battery electric is the most efficient way. It's easy, although we have the problem of distributing electricity, energy around society, but it's still relatively easy compared to, let's say, fuel cell. And the reason why we only had the prototype on Gotland Ring in 2007, and it didn't go to production as a compliance car until 11 years later, is the reason that fuel cell distribution, fuel cell energy, hydrogen, is hard to first of all, it's expensive and inefficient to produce unless we have a huge abundance of renewable energy. So in the first phase, we're going to even land, sea, especially now in transportations, like we do now. We have the Smart Road Gotland, which you may have heard of, electric road system that we will touch upon later on in this presentation as well. But there we basically drive on a inductive charging, dynamic charging. So we drive along with on this particular road with a heavy truck or bus, or you can drive with a passenger car. And while you drive, you can actually charge simultaneously. So this enables also that you could drive even without a battery or a small battery or just a super cap instead. So that means that this heavy part of the vehicle and the most expensive part you can make obsolete, actually, or at least lessen the cost of it and the weight of it. Actually, if you have a bus with a super cap right now, it has hard to be approved as a bus because it's actually so light, because it has no traditional engine, it has electric engines, and then it has no battery, which weighs so much. It's actually too light to be considered a bus for some reason within EU regulation. So it's a positive problem, but have some administration to do. There are other electric road systems as well. You have conductive charging when you have actual wires or other contact forms. Honda has one that comes on the side and connects like a robotic arm, and then you have the ones that Siemens used in Germany. You have the ones, the wires. With the wires, conductive charging, I think, is very good, for instance, for let's say quarry, a mine industry, where you can't maybe have a tarmac and 8 centimeters under tarmac. We have coils for the inductive charging, for the dynamic charging. So yeah, conductive and inductive go hand in hand with battery electric development and constantly improving batteries. Next phase to come to a fuel cell car is also electric car. It's a fuel cell electric car. So in that case, we need hydrogen. And how do you get hydrogen? Well, you can take hydrogen from water, and you can have electrolysis. You can have you take the carbon from the air, and you take hydrogen from the water, and you can create even electrofuels, synthetic electrofuels, what we call also power to X, this kind of advanced e-fuels, you could say. So the development is like right now, the easiest way to go is battery electric, and then the next phase, once we have a bit more of an abundance of renewable energy and very inexpensive such, you go towards fuel cell electric, and then eventually also, when it's really cheap, the energy cost and the production of the to making these electrofuels, you would have to wait a bit longer, but we are getting there. Solar is very inexpensive right now, so if you have the right circumstances and the right production around you for energy, you could actually already start producing electrofuels as well. So why would we need electrofuels? Well, of course, you take existing carbon and basically recycle it. You take carbon and you take water, you take hydrogen, put them together, and you can create different versions of electrofuels, and through the chemical process you can then eventually get a liquid methanol, for instance, which is good enough for airplanes or power plants or what have you. So but it's inefficient and it costs a lot to produce, but it's getting better through the learning curve and so on. So the economics, we can scale it up eventually, and we have as long as it's a very early on technology, but I believe we will get there. And that also enables so-called ICE, internal combustion engines, and the traditional distribution of energy and system that we have all around the world. That means that we can actually have a sustainable energy form, that we can still use the old technology in the form of these combustion engines. And one really important thing is with the old energy power plant, let's say you have a coal power or a huge any kind of power plant, and you basically have to turn up and down the energy to adjust to the societal need of, be it housing or transportation or heating or whatever, what have you. You need to decouple the generation of energy from the actual demand, and then you can optimize storage solutions, and that will also balance the grid. And you can also use electric vehicles for balancing the grid. You can already do it. You need some adjustment and some kind of equipment in a home, but again, you could offset huge investments in like you could say obsolete power plants. It should be more towards micro production and less towards these huge power plants, kind of like make the internet of energy. So internet, as you know, we don't have any failures in the internet, but power failures we have all around the world in all societies today. But having a stable grid, smart grids with macro and micro grids and off grids and all kind of combinations of grid systems, you can always have a decentralized and safe energy supply. So by decoupling the generation of energy from the demand, you can actually, for instance, with within the intraday variations, when you have surplus of energy, if I have an electric car, I can put my BMW i3s, for instance, I can put it in to charge, and during the night, off peak hours, and then during the day, when it's mostly standing still at the office or at home or somewhere, I can sell the energy, so I can make money. So basically, why not utilize your EV fully? Why would you only use it while driving a short distance and then standing still? It's like any investment, you should have full utilization of that investment. And so it's also a business proposition that allows and enables some kind of a sane use of an investment. And also this thing about owning a car, a vehicle, it will be more like a mobile phone that you pay for usage, you pay for hours, you pay for minutes and so on. And it's not going to be a capital investment that you buy a vehicle, because there's no use. And car sharing, of course, during pandemic times is maybe not the preferred way to go. And you can see that they've had some problems with car sharing companies, and many companies have disappeared, rental companies, with the absence of flights and so on. So you could definitely start balancing the grid with electrification of traffic easily, with even just passenger cars. But mainly, of course, it's energy storage. You can have air batteries, you can have second life batteries from cars, you can have, there's so many ways you can do the storage part, not only with electro fuels, of course. So electro fuels, we don't have too much time to go through it, but to understand that it's just basically chemistry. You take from the air the carbon, recycle it, so it's existing carbon that's already there that you're using. So when it goes back, it would have been there anyway, and you take the hydrogen from water, and then basically you create. Eventually, you can have a gas version of it, or you can have a liquefied version like methanol, for instance. So it's costly, and it necessitates an abundance of inexpensive renewable energy to produce it. But I think this will be a viable way to go in the future. Combined, there's no silver bullet. It will be a combination, I think, for battery electric, fuel cell electric, in the air, on land, at sea. It will be electro fuels in combination. You can use still the old technology of internal combustion engines, for instance. And especially in energy capture and storage, it will be imperative to use a combination of all these. And then I strongly believe in this project that we have, the electric road system. You can have both inductive and you can have conductive, but for mainstream, most of the roads without any outside disturbances from wires and stuff, it's really quite practical with the inductive charging while moving. So basically you drive and you charge while moving, and it's a passive network. There's no danger. The electromagnetic radiation is not the same as radiation from other sources. So it's basically it's like you shave in the morning. The radiation is more actually from a shaver than you have from this electric road system, because you basically guard the vehicle from any such magnetic radiation. So I would once more, the active investment in smart infrastructure, electric road system, and you can have super caps, which lessens the battery emphasis. You have energy harvesting, smart grids, micro and macro such, energy capture and storage, decentralization of energy. These are really important things. And then, of course, to be able to manage all these, you need some kind of a, I'm not saying you need more regulation, you need good regulation. You need proactive policy making and regulation to give a level playing field for everybody. Like now, with the fuel industry, it's kind of crazy. It's like you, again, you play tennis, and my size of a court is huge, and then the other have a little court because they have subsidies and so on, and it's not really a level playing field. At the same time, we need to help, of course, the new technologies which have the potential to solve the crucial problem we have for this planet. So it's you have to have proactive policies. One more thing about electrofuels, just about advantages. You have the good side, you have storage for surplus energy. You can create fuel cell, fuel for fuel cell technology, hydrogen fueling stations, advanced fuel production, and added grid stability as well. It's one way to stabilize the grid as well. You have alternative to network expansion. You can actually offset some investment in some power plants. Can be used in remote areas like in islands, for instance, somewhere. You can look at archipelago in Thailand. When I was many beautiful islands, went there climbing and doing things, and it's like they have this huge diesel generated power for the whole island for everything they have there. Integration of variable renewable energies. You have scale storage possibilities and so on. There are some disadvantages. For instance, now when it's a new technology, it's going to take some time to scale it up and using the learning curve, and it's a developing technology, but the cost is the biggest threshold. You have a very low efficiency, but that's why it's imperative that we have an abundance of renewable energy, and that's where we have to go. Energy should be something positive, not something like, oh, the children in Africa reading their homework, they can't be a problem. It has to be a happy thing to consume energy, and it has to come from the right sources. We can't just stop living. So I don't believe in passive lifestyle. We have to have an active lifestyle. We have to electrify all the bits and pieces of transportation and society so we can all have an active life. Of course, also we have the high conversion losses, the high transportation and distribution cost. If you have it in a liquid form, once you have the methanol or the hydrogen and so on, it's not so easy to distribute. So in that sense, battery electric is the easy way to go, because electricity is basically everywhere. You just need to, of course, set up a lot of supercharging stations and some electric road systems and so on, and then you can actually go forward from there. A little bit about the smart infrastructure, electric road systems I already talked about a little bit. I can show you a little bit. The good thing about this, again, you could see that guidance from the governmental level. So there's a place for government to create, kind of like a referee, create a level playing field, but also we need a government that can support new technologies. And I think the Swedish Transport Administration, Trafikverket, is a good example. They have a pre-commercial procurement that our little company won, and we made the application together with Electro, our technology partner, who is running the business here now, and I started a Nordic division here, Nordic daughter company. So it's a unique dynamic charging technology, and it's really showing to be a success now. So I think the Swedish Transport Administration, they have a strategy, and they see the future of thousands of kilometers of main roads being electrified. Then which parts will be inductive, which will be conductive and inductive, that we will see what their decisions are. My view is more towards the inductive side on public roads, because for so-called OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, they prefer to have vehicles where as minimum intrusions, like in a vehicle. If you have an electric car, passenger car, you just put one receiver underneath, which is like an old-fashioned, let's say like a really old-fashioned big computer laptop. You put it underneath and that's it, instead of these kind of a very very complicated things you put on vehicles with conductive charging. And then you have basically for our bus you have 4 receivers to charge more, and for a heavy truck you may have 5. You can have more. If it's a really big heavy truck you can put even more receivers. So then while you drive on this infrastructure, which is about 8 centimeters under the road surface, it's very, very low maintenance, because basically you need to, here you see a picture, this is what you see under, this is what's under the road. You have these coils, and then you have management units along the road which feed in the electricity into the road. And here you can see a picture. We have the head of engineering from the head engineer from Honda, who is in charge of, for instance, this robotic conductive charging device that comes from the side to the car. And so he was here to visit in November, in the good old times, the golden times when we had pre-COVID times in November, exactly 1 year ago. You see 2019 there. We can actually be close to each other and speak and shake hands. So that's Smart Road Gotland. If you're interested, you can go and look it up online as well to get more details about it. We also have here our what I've been working on since 2008, which actually a feature of this smart energy road and traffic system. A feature is this dynamic charging bit that we started with. It was easier to get financing for this kind of project from the Swedish Transport Administration, and Electro had a great startup. It's a great startup company that has the technology, which is now leading for sure in the world in this area. So that's a feature, but it's more than just charging. It's about harvesting, energy harvesting, solar, thermal, wind, kinetic energy, hydraulic, geothermal, and so on. So then we want to have like air battery storage and second life storage. We have solar parks along connected to the road, and also you can have them in and along the roads and so on. But there have been some solar road projects before. In Holland they have a bike road, and in the US they've had something for a long time too. But I think you can't just have in the road. It's very expensive. You have to look at different versions of it for different parts of the world where you have a different emphasis on what type of energy you want to harvest. Then also we are looking at self-driving, the next phase of also testing the Smart Road Gotland. The dynamic charging is like we want to couple it with self-driving vehicles, both passenger cars at high speeds at Gotland Ring, and also of course heavier vehicles, buses and trucks. So that we need to do on a closed area, so it's not on a public road. The Smart Road Gotland is the world's first dynamically charging electric road system on a public road for trucks and buses. And on the racetrack we want to do it at high speeds, we want to do it self-driving mode and so on. So that's the next phase we're going to test in the future. How many minutes do I have left? Oh, okay, then very quickly to the last page here. I go back to the macro level. To be able to reach any of these goals, constructive multilateral policy making and regulation is a must. Luckily, there's an administration change in the US, so they will be back in the Paris Agreement, so that's a must to get the US on board again. We have transport electrification is not possible without most of these bits and pieces here. And to get the whole picture down with the carbon CO2 problem, we have to do both reforestation and afforestation. Afforestation is where there previously weren't any trees, and reforestation is where there were trees before, but no longer. So we had to get Brazil someday on board, and maybe there's a regime change there someday. Of course, then it's about awareness, educational campaigns, sustainable lifestyle, but all these green funds, climate investments, climate corporations on a global scale. There has to be enforcement, some sort of carbon market, carbon tax is a must. Smart infrastructure solutions. So I think, thank you anyway. We don't have much time to do more. All I can say is let's make the planet great again, like many people have said, not only Macron, but let's do something different than we have done so far. Thank you.